Hi everyone, this is Donna. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to talk a little bit today about what a bookkeeper does and how they can help your business. That really is kind of my core. This is what I do for a living. And a little bit about how that goes to accountants versus bookkeepers. So, of course, as always, if you enjoy these videos, please like, share, and subscribe. Spread the love a little bit. Let people that you let the people around you know if you think I'm providing good content. And with that, I'm going to kind of jump right in. So a bookkeeper is not generally an accountant. They can be. But a bookkeeper has to have a pretty solid understanding of accounting principles, not as in-depth as an accountant does. Usually an accountant has at a minimum, they have a bachelor's degree in accounting. Most of the accountants I know have at least a master's. And bookkeepers are not required to have any formal education at all, although typically they are working on their degree, or they are someone who's worked in an office, been an office manager, kind of has that background. They do have a pretty solid understanding of at least what is a debit versus what is a credit, what is a liability versus an expense, what is an asset versus revenue. They understand the difference between profits and revenue. And they've got a pretty good idea of what they're doing as far as an accounting perspective. But this is not someone who's sitting here and just has no clue what they're doing. I have seen books done by CPAs, I was told, that looked like they had no idea what they were doing. So the bookkeeper is the one that's in the trenches with the business owner. They're the ones that are doing the day-to-day recording of financial transactions. This means that they're the ones that are in the books all the time. They're the ones who are reconciling the bank accounts every month, and bank accounts should be reconciled every month. I had one client that wanted me to reconcile weekly. The bank doesn't reconcile weekly, so I'm not going to do that, you know. But when you get the statement from the bank, you do need to reconcile your bank account to make sure that you haven't missed any transactions and to see what maybe hasn't cleared the bank yet. They manage the bank feeds into the accounting software to make sure that everything that's coming in every day is accounted for. And then, like I said, they do the final reconciliation at the end of the month based on the bank statement. They handle your accounts receivable in a lot of circumstances. Which means that they're the ones that do the invoicing. They're the ones that send out requests for money. That's kind of important. If you sell on credit, your bookkeeper is the one that does that, makes sure that the invoices go out. In a larger company, they may work with a credit manager, and I have had all of these jobs to make sure that all of the invoices are paid in full on time. They will then the bookkeeper then pulls in all of the payments and groups them together to form the deposit, and they make sure that everything is deposited both in the accounting software and to the actual bank. They handle your accounts payable, and what that means is that they bring in all of the bills, they enter them into your accounting software, they make sure that everything is paid on time, usually on a schedule. Now I like to do my accounts payables on the 5th and the 20th, pretty close. I have a client that has discounts that are applied for a lot of his trade lines if he pays by the 10th, so I will do AP on the 10th to make sure that we have everything postmarked on that day. And then I do them again, usually about the 20th to 25th, somewhere in there. And that's just to make sure everything is paid, everything's paid on time, that we know what is owed. I actually reconcile all those trade lines, and that's just part of what I do as a bookkeeper. They work with your tax preparer to make sure that you're in tax compliance. Now here's one that I really hadn't thought about until I started working on my degree, actually. And we brought on, I started working with a CPA who's outstanding with taxes, and he's asking me about things like fixed assets, that a lot of our furniture and equipment, that a lot of my clients don't give me that information. So as the bookkeeper, it is my responsibility to go back to my client and say, What was this tractor? What was the original purchase price on it? What's the loan that you have on it? I need information on the loan. How much interest are you paying on it? Do you have the statements for that? So that we can properly account for things like interest income, or excuse me, interest expense, and what is actually being paid on the equipment, and so that we can amortize the loan properly, make sure all the payments are recorded so we actually know what the liabilities are. This shows up on the balance sheet. And then I can provide that information to the tax preparer in an intelligent fashion. We also, bookkeepers will prepare financial statements. Generally, what that means is I go into QuickBooks and I just generate them. I also do know how to sit down and explain, and I've done this in previous videos and I'll probably do it again, explain what you're looking at in the balance sheet, the statement of cash flows, and the income statement or profit and loss. And the reason I like to know how to explain those is that a lot of business owners don't know what they're looking at when they look at those. It's nothing against the business owners. A lot of business owners kind of go in, and if they're amazing at making pies, they know a lot about making pies. They might even know a lot about managing other people making pies, but they don't necessarily know how to tell if their pie making business is profitable, and that's my job. They will often take on payroll and HR if it's a small business. I have one client that I do payroll for. I have space for a few more. But payroll generally means that I'm chasing people down and saying, are your timesheets correct? Did you forget to clock out on this day? Did you forget to clock in on this other day? Do we have your correct hours? And then I also, for this particular client, have been known to keep track of vacation days, sick days, and make sure that things are running smoothly. Now, I don't take a whole lot of responsibility for that because I am a remote bookkeeper. I don't usually work on site for a lot of reasons. One of them being that if I eliminate a commute and I am able to work in my own office right here where I have control over my environment, I'm actually able to get a lot more done more efficiently. So that is my preference, honed over, what has it been, 15 years that I've been working from home. But I do have the ability to do payroll and kind of take on some of those human resource functions. They also make technology and streamlining recommendations. Usually what that looks like is something along the lines of, I noticed your point of sale. If you're using Stripe, it's not connecting over to QuickBooks very well, but I have this other processor that does work better. Maybe, would you like to try this out? It may or may not save you money, but I will look and see what can I possibly do to make my job just as easy as possible. Now, with all of this said, I know a lot of bookkeepers will charge an hourly rate. Rates for bookkeepers outside of a company like myself run between $30 and $50 an hour. I do not charge an hourly rate. I charge a retainer, a monthly retainer, and then there's an hourly rate on top of that. So the retainer that I charge covers, X number of hours. And if it looks like it's going to be more than that, or if the client starts asking things that are not in the engagement letter, they're not in the agreement, if I say, well, I'm going to reconcile 4 bank accounts and I'm going to do 10 invoices for AR and I'm going to track 4 trade lines, and all of a sudden there's 10 trade lines, I'm going to charge more. I'm going to go back and say either we need to adjust your retainer or I need to start charging you retainer plus hourly. Depends on what it is. Really, that comes into play for me historically. It has come into play when I had, I was actually doing books for a person who was going through a divorce, and we charged a certain amount just to do the books, but then I also had to go and be deposed. And that was outside of the scope of work. So we charged an hourly rate for me to go and sit in the lawyer's office and answer uncomfortable questions. So So there is that was outside of the scope of we're going to put your stuff into QuickBooks and make a recommendation. Then I had to go testify. So that's just an example of something that's outside of the scope of work. We do notice a lot that there's a lot of mission creep, where we agree to this much work for this little price, and it kind of blows up into this much work for this little price. And when I'm pricing, I'm not necessarily just looking at this as how much money can I make. It is, what is an appropriate price for this client, for the workload they're asking me to take on? And what is actually going to pay for my time? And I do charge on the higher end, so because I'm highly experienced. The really big thing that bookkeepers do, they do all of the daily reconciliations, the daily entering of bank transactions, or all of the transactions, not necessarily the ones through the bank, the bills, the invoices. They make sure you get paid. And some of the things that are going to affect the monthly cost is, what do you want your bookkeeper to do? And it also includes, do you want to use an online software versus her own desktop software, which she may own and not need to charge you more for? The complexity, the volume of your business transactions is going to make a big difference. The bookkeeper's experience, I'm highly experienced, so I charge a bit more. Whether you use any accounting software, it says in this article, and I'm kind of laughing going, if you don't use accounting software, you are not my client. But what type? I have used QuickBooks is my personal favorite. I do use both QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. I usually renew Desktop in even numbered years. It's just kind of the way it's worked. So if we're working online, if you do need to see stuff in real time, then there's going to be a higher charge because I have to cover the cost of the software. I'm still kind of laughing. If you don't use accounting software and you're in business, I don't know what to tell you. I don't work with FreshBooks. I don't work with a lot of various softwares. I work with QuickBooks. I have used FreshBooks and don't like it. I have used Quicken, don't care for Quicken on a business standpoint. I think if you're in business, you should have QuickBooks. I have used Sage Intacct, and I think for most small businesses, Intacct is so far, it is just so robust. Unless you're Chevron, you really don't need something that big. And then the other big question people ask me is, are you an accountant? Well, the answer to that really is yes, I am an accountant. But most of my work is in the bookkeeping field. I do the day-to-day data entry for most of my clients. Now, I do have other clients that like I said, I'm working on my bachelor's degree. I'm over halfway through. The difference basically is that an accountant doesn't do so much the day-to-day data entry. They do a lot of reading reports and interpreting them and analyzing them so that then they can make business recommendations. It's like, I don't even know how to explain the difference really. As the bookkeeper, it becomes my job to make sure that all the financial records are correct. As the accountant, it's my job to review those records and look at the reports and then make recommendations to the client based on those reports. So if I'm looking at a client's reports and I see that their payroll is out of line for the industry average, and I do look at that, then I'm going to go back to the client and go, why is your payroll so high? Most other businesses in your industry don't pay that much for payroll. So what's going on? I might then start talking to them about tightening up certain processes. I will talk to them about different processes they can make. But as an accountant, I start to work more as the CFO. And if you are looking for a CFO type of a professional, I can certainly provide those services. but it costs a lot more than bookkeeping. So that really is what it comes down to. And then tax preparation is its own thing. You do not need to have a degree of any kind to be a tax preparer. You do not have to have, actually, you don't have to have that much education to be a tax preparer at all. You don't have to have any specific certifications. You do have to go through a process with the IRS to be able to e-file. And I can talk about that in another time. There are different designations for people that specialize in taxes, as opposed to people that work with publicly traded companies, as opposed to people who work with companies and their internal accounting. But as an accountant, my job becomes to advise a client to do more consultation, which costs a lot more than simple data entry. It costs a lot more than bookkeeping, and bookkeeping is a lot more than just data entry. My job becomes to analyze, to advise, and to consult, and it's a lot less about making sure the information is accurate inside of the accounting software. What a bookkeeper really does for your business, though, is they help you really focus on your business. I bump up against this a lot, where I have clients say, well, you shouldn't be charging me as much as you're charging me. And I go, I'm actually working more hours than you're paying me for. They don't realize how much goes into making sure that those books are accurate. One of my pet peeves usually comes up at the end of the year, beginning, right at the beginning of tax season, when clients will say, I need you to adjust my balance sheet, I need you to make all these adjustments, and I'm going, there's $200, there's 200 hours worth of work here to make sure that your accounts are accurate before I can make those adjustments, especially if it's not one that I've worked on before. But most business owners that I've talked to are very, very busy. They don't have a lot of time to sit down and learn QuickBooks and learn bookkeeping, learn accounting sufficiently that they can get their bookkeeping done. They don't know what they don't know, is really what it kind of comes down to. So if you are a business owner, I highly recommend that you get a bookkeeper just as soon as possible, because we will be able to help you make your business profitable, not least because we are now freeing up your time so that you can do the things that you love to do, and that's probably not bookkeeping. If you are interested in having my company do your books for you, we would love to talk to you and see if you're a good fit as a client. I have a lot of people that I work with, and so that's really exciting for me. Please feel free to shoot me a message on my Facebook page or through my YouTube channel and let me know. Usually the information's all over the place, so we would love to talk to you and see if you are a good fit for us. I really don't believe in trying to force square pegs into round holes when it comes to business relationships. Accounting and bookkeeping is very much relationship based. It's very trust based. And so if you are uncomfortable with someone that you're working with who is a bookkeeper or an accountant, it's always best to address that and make sure that the person that you're working with works with your style. On the other hand, my personal pet peeve is clients that try to micromanage me. They try to tell me how to do my job. They try to tell me what hours I can work. And I don't work as an employee ever. So that becomes a little bit on the frustrating side. And I will talk in a later video again about the difference between employees and independent contractors and how much control you can have over each. So maybe that'll clear things up. With that, I am going to close this video. I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon. Have a wonderful summer, and I will talk to you next week.